So I want to express my delight and pleasure of giving a Dhamma talk here in this beautiful temple. We had a previous meeting with Master Guang Sen, who invited me to come and teach retreat here in Singapore. And that was the last time I was here, which was a few years ago. Then last year, with the COVID pandemic and the quarantine rules, it was impossible. But this time, because of the generous invitation of the master, I made special effort to come here to give a retreat, short retreat in the new meditation hall, and to give this public lecture, because there's so much interest in Buddhism now internationally, and this is this is fairly recent in terms of my own experience, because the West is, basically doesn't know anything about Buddhism and regards it as a culture and as a kind of Asian religion. But the emphasis, the thing that what people are really interested in Europe and the United States, Australia, countries like that, is in mindfulness meditation. So this English word mindfulness is a kind of word now you hear all the time. In 1977, I went from Thailand to live in the UK and England, and even though mindfulness is a common enough word in English, it's usually meant be mindful when you're crossing the street or when you're doing something. So the mindfulness of objects that you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and so forth. So you develop mindfulness by sending consciousness out through the senses, to the objects of the senses that we have. And that kind of mindfulness is appropriate for worldly survival. In order to survive as a human being on planet Earth, we have to be mindful of our lives and dealing with the food and procreation of species, and survival as a creature on a planet that has many dangers, many problems. But what is lacking in the Western definition of mindfulness, it doesn't have the all-encompassing meaning that it has in BuddhaDhamma or Buddhism, because the teachings of the Buddha are all about developing awareness, not of just objects of the senses, but of the senses themselves, being aware of the body, the feelings, the emotions we have, our ability to remember the past. And we don't tend to, in the West, we don't tend to have a teaching that points to this way of mindfulness, of turning conscious attention inward rather than going outward to the objects of the senses. So in my monastic life, I've been very fortunate in my training, going to Thailand, found a very excellent teacher known as Ajahn Chah, and his whole emphasis, his basic teaching was all about mindfulness, awareness. because he could see in Thailand, Thai culture is the people in Thailand, about 95% at least, consider themselves Buddhist. But still, so much of the religious aspects are just ceremonial or traditional forms, and the teachings about morality, sila, and generosity are very basic to Thai culture. But bhavana, or meditation, or mindfulness, oftentimes is ignored because they see it as something very advanced, and you have to be a spiritually inclined person or a Buddhist monk to really practice, to be mindful inwardly. So in this sense of sati, the Pali word for mindfulness, sati, sampajanya, is a way of looking inward. Instead of sending your consciousness out through the senses, you're looking inward at your feelings, you're observing the body, witnessing the way it is as we experience life in its in very experiences that we have. So Luang Por Chah was very strong, has a very strong influence in Thailand, because this Thai forest tradition was in a remote part of Thailand, northwest Thailand, and now it's very much recognized as wisdom teaching, and the forest meditation teachers are very, very highly regarded by most people in Thailand. And Luang Por Chah has become a worldwide. Is famous all over the world because of the teaching is direct. Like the Buddha's teaching is very direct teaching. It's not about belief in things or objects. You're not told you have to believe. And so this is quite for someone who is a doubter and a cynic and a skeptic. When I'm told to believe in something, I tend to, resent that of just being told what's right, what's wrong, what's good and bad, and trying to conform to what other people think. But the attraction for Buddhism to me was an encouragement to investigate life itself, investigate experience as an individual person. And this is available to all of us because, the idea that only monks can really practice meditation is a belief. It's not what the Buddha taught, but it's a belief, cultural belief. But in my experience in northeast Thailand was Luang Por Chah was teaching meditation to villagers and city dwellers, anyone who showed an interest. So it was very inspiring to live with him, and I developed a great deal of respect and gratitude towards this particular teacher in Thailand. So he kind of understood. I was the first Westerner to join his Sangha. And so, people would say, how can you've never gone to the West, you're from the Northeast, you're a country boy, how do you get along with Sumedho? He's American. But Luang Por Chah was a truly wise individual, so he understood the human nature that we all share. It isn't just understanding Thai monks or Northeast Thais or Bangkok Thais or just Thai people in general, but he could see the reality behind the identities that one acquires in life. So it took me, several years to really understand what he was actually teaching, because I had to learn another language, had to learn Thai and Northeast Thai dialect. So mindfulness or awareness, I use them both synonymously. I oftentimes refer to the practice as conscious awareness, of consciousness being aware, not just of sensory experiences that we identify with, that we form our sense of a separate self, a person, a personality, a man or a woman, a Buddhist or a Christian, or how we tend to identify with conditions given to us after we're born. But it's the ability of humanity in general, this particular species on the planet at this time, has this ability to reflect, to contemplate the way things are through direct experience in the present moment. So this mindfulness practice is paying attention to the body as it is experienced right now. It's like this. Or to the emotional, the mood that one is experiencing at this time, it's like this. Or to the views and opinions that one has about good and bad, right and wrong. It's like this, because pure conscious awareness is not critical. It's not something you acquire, it's something you're born with. Like a newborn baby is fully conscious form. But it doesn't have an ego yet, it doesn't identify itself as a baby, as a boy or girl baby, as a Singaporean or any other. These are acquired identities. So in mindfulness practice, it's like returning to original conscious awareness that is natural. It's not something you create. You don't create conscious awareness. You are that. That is your true nature. Where what we identify with is not what we really are. So sending your senses, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body outward to the objects. We think in terms of beautiful or ugly or true or false, right or wrong, heaven or hell, happiness or suffering. So we have these words that we tend to operate from. We all want to be happy, we want to be healthy, we want to be respected, we want to be successful, we want to be wealthy. And so these are desirable goals in life. When we're thinking about life itself and we're identifying with the physical form that we experience the world through. So this form that we identify with is, in terms of BuddhaDhamma, impermanent. It's a changing condition. Its nature of all condition, all phenomena, is that it's subject to change, incessant change. And it doesn't always change for the best. change can go either way. It can get better or it can get worse. But so what we identify with is always, it can be very worrisome because we're very dependent upon survival, on eating food, on living in a society of surviving in a big city like Singapore or in a forest hermitage in the jungle. Survival is a basic kind of instinct that you're born with. So survival is how to survive in a form, how to procreate the species. These are kind of basic instinctual conditions that come with the physical form, human form. But the human form is very impermanent. And this is why when we identify with it, we suffer. Because, for example, the COVID pandemic that you've all been subjected to in the past 2 or 3 years, everybody wearing a mask is because of the danger provided by disease that's pandemic all over the world. Well, that's the survival. Worldly survival depends on surviving the COVID pandemic. You're asked to get vaccinations, wear masks, isolate yourself, quarantine yourself. The body needs to be, when one has COVID, one has to live alone under quarantine rules. And so we feel very much identified with the form as it's isolated, as it has to take medicines, wear masks, and all the inconvenience that the pandemic has provided us. But pandemics are worldly conditions. We don't want them. We hope they never happen again, but they are part of the world that we identify with. And with mindfulness, we're breaking down this identity with the unsatisfactory forms that we assume are very personal, and we judge accordingly. So in the worldly life, there's endless problems between men and women, husband and wife, between the political systems, right or left or whatever you identify with, between religions, jealousies and fears and prejudices, racial prejudices are all learned or contrived perceptions that you acquire through conditioning that can create all kinds of endless problems and difficulties in our experience within this separate form. So how do you deal with this? How did, in the history of the Buddha, he was, as in the scriptures, Prince Siddhartha was born in a very privileged family, and all the privileges of royalty and education, all the best that was offered at that time to people such as Prince Siddhartha. And yet, as he grew older, he realized that no matter how privileged life might be for an individual, like a prince, he would eventually become king. He was married, happily married with a baby, and so on the worldly terms, he was very fortunate. We say in Buddhist jargon, he had good karma. But also he realized that no matter how good it gets, it changes. And when his first encounter with a corpse of a sick person and an old man, then this affected him, because in the palace life, all these things were hidden away. They didn't want to talk about it or look at it. The ideal society where everything's beautiful, youthful, healthy, and desirable. Then the story of leaving the palace, secretly leaving one night to examine, to witness life as it actually is for most people. He witnessed the 4 heavenly messengers, which was the old man bent over with age, a sick man lying on the street in pain and sickness, and a human corpse. And then these 4 heavenly messengers, the 4th one is a samana, or a monk, meditating under a tree. So these 4 Devadutas, they're called heavenly messengers. They awaken Prince Siddhartha to realize there's something more he needs to understand that he doesn't understand yet. So when I first ordained in Thailand, a Thai monk asked me if in Christianity if we had angels, and so I said, yeah, we do. And he said, what do they look like? And I said, well, they're very beautiful, and they have white wings, and they play harps, and they sing. And he said, and I said, what are the angels in Buddhism? And he said, an old man, a sick person, a corpse, and a samana. And that was really interesting, because the first 3 are not beautiful. But this is investigating life. We all have to get old, get sick, and die. So what is the answer to this? If this is all we have is a human body, and this is what we identify with, it's very disappointing, because it just gets old and gets weakened, the senses diminish, and you get diseases and physical problems. And I'm speaking from experience, like this old body sitting there. It was, this is its natural state. It's supposed to get old. But if I take it personally, through my ego, through the sense of myself as a personality and a separate person, you don't want it. You don't want the limitations of old age and poor vision and deafness and things like that are part of growing old. But when you break that identity through investigating, through mindful awareness, looking inward at a consciousness aware of itself, you realize that consciousness doesn't never gets old and sick and dies. The body does. That's what it's supposed to do. But pure awareness, pure conscious awareness is not a sankhara, it's not a phenomenon, it's not a condition. It's natural. Like you were born conscious. Consciousness wasn't born in you. You were born into consciousness. And you grow up in consciousness, and the body gets old in consciousness. But consciousness or mindfulness or awareness, these words point to this sati sampajanya or mindfulness awareness, which is here and now. It's not something you learn or get or acquire, but something that's natural. So in the Pali tradition, we use the word Dhamma, which in Mahayana they call Dhamma, but Pali language is the kind of basis for Theravada teaching, so the word comes out as Dhamma, is deathless. And how can we realize the Dhamma? By trying to find it or conceive it. What is the Dhamma anyway? When you can give words like absolute reality, absolute truth. This is how we define it in English. The Dhamma is perfect, and it's what we take refuge in. Bhutang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So we take refuge in Dhamma. What is taking refuge in Dhamma anyway? What are you taking refuge in? Absolute truth, absolute reality, but what is that? These are words, whether they're in Pali or Chinese or English. Their words are sankharas. All languages are sankharas, or phenomena, or conditions. They're created by human beings. So we have different languages in different countries, different cultures, but they're all creations. They're created. They arise and they cease. They have a beginning and ending. And so much of our life is grasping ideas and words, concepts, opinions. And so we bind ourselves to this limited function, the thinking faculty, and then we suffer accordingly. So living in Wat Pah in northeast Thailand, we had, back in 1967 when I first met Ajahn Chah, the monastery, Wat Pah was very basic, very primitive, had no conveniences, no electricity, no running water, and it was in a forest. So you lived in huts or kutis, and you had to draw drinking water from a well every day. We'd all assembly at 3:00 in the afternoon and draw water from the well and distribute it to these various kitchens and bathrooms and so forth, so that this was part of the daily routine of providing water from a well. And so then, living there and coming from I was born and brought up in a city. I'm from a middle-class kind of city background. You're living in a way you've never lived before. But Ajahn Chah's teaching to me very directly, even in the beginning, was to be mindful of it, of how it affected me. How does living in going on alms round every day, on rocky roads, barefoot, and then you'd have to, when you're young, you go to distant villages. And so, this was so new to me that it had certainly emotional reactions to the life, where the conveniences of modern city life are not available. And Ajahn Chah, was impressing on me the need to just witness the way I feel. He wasn't telling me how I should feel about it. He didn't say you have to like this or approve of it or just adapt to it as best you can. So that's good advice. That's wise advice. So I could develop awareness even though I was missing out on the actual teachings, because Luang Por Chah was very at his peak of teaching. 4 or 5 hour dasanas every evening in Isan dialect, and I couldn't understand anything. So I had to sit listening in the evening to like 4 hour, 5 hour length talks in a language that at first didn't make any sense to me. And I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there. There's a natural reaction. So I asked Luang Por Chah if I could be excused from when he gives these talks. I thought I'll go back to my kuti and practice samadhi. And so I asked permission from Ajahn Chah. He said, no, you have to stay. So then, I thought, that's not reasonable. In terms of the way I think, it's reasonable that I'm a foreigner who can't understand. It's a kind of waste of time to sit there in physical discomfort and boredom, mental boredom and aversion. You get very angry, very uncomfortable. You're not used to sitting like that for very long. But Luang Por Chah, his teaching was to be the witness to the feeling that one is experiencing in the present moment is like this. So I could actually do that and learn from it. So I had a lot of faith and trust in Ajahn Chah, but my American ideals of being fair were being challenged and being reasonable. So, it's just a very unpleasant experience. I don't want to go through that every evening. And so, it seems reasonable to me. But being reasonable is not always appropriate. Under those conditions, what Luang Por Chah wanted me to do was be aware of what I was feeling, the physical discomfort, the pain in the legs, the mental state of boredom or anger or wanting to leave. So I began to do that, following his advice, to just be the witness to the way it is in the present. So during that first year, where I couldn't understand the language, I did learn a lot. I had a lot of insight. And one time I was remembering, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I can't stand this anymore. I'm fed up. I want to leave. I'm fed up. I want to go. And then when I just listened, I listened to myself saying, I'm thinking I'm fed up, I want to leave. I realized that I wasn't really fed up. That was the habit, personal habit, a reaction to the situation of the present moment, that the awareness, pure conscious awareness, never gets fed up or angry. So it was like an insight, where you have an insight into this ultimate reality, Dhamma, through observing, being a witness to experience as we have to live our lives in these forms till they grow old and die. So the training was all about this awareness, being your refuge, rather than in taking refuge in your body, which we began to see was very, changeable. There were a lot of mosquitoes in the monastery, and big ones that were really annoying. And being a bhikkhu, a Buddhist monk, you can't kill anything. And so, as a layperson, I had no compunction about killing mosquitoes. But as a bhikkhu, I had to, according to the Vinaya, the discipline, you're not supposed to kill anything intentionally. So, you just learn to live with mosquitoes. And when you complain about it, there's too many mosquitoes, you listen to that, the mind grumbling, complaining because you don't like and don't want mosquitoes is like this. So what do you take refuge in then in a situation like that? In your complaining mind, your view about what's right and wrong, or how your emotions are reacting to the present situation, or in sati sampajanya, mindfulness, awareness, conscious awareness. This is the escape hatch that the Buddha pointed to in his teaching. Because pure conscious awareness doesn't get old, doesn't get sick, doesn't die, doesn't complain, doesn't think. It has no language. Pure consciousness has no language to cling to, but it is where wisdom manifests in our lives. It's a natural wisdom that's available to all of us, that we learn to trust when we take refuge in BuddhaDhamma Sangha. What are we're taking refuge in awareness. Buddha is awareness itself. It's the witness to the Dhamma, the way things are. So when we think of Buddha, we have a beautiful Buddha image on the shrine here, very impressive, very big. But that's not the real Buddha. Or the historical Buddha of 2,565 years ago in India, and that's a memory. We have memory, we've been told about that Buddha. But do we take refuge in a memory or in a Buddha Rupa, or do we take refuge in awareness? Because it's Buddha that knows Dhamma. It's a witnessing paradigm of Buddha and Dhamma. And it's a beautiful paradigm because it's a reminder to be the witness to experience rather than the owner of it. So Dhamma is perfect, complete and whole. Is about the best kind of adjectives to use for it. But it's always here and now, it's timeless. And it's through awareness, suddenly opening to the present moment. At this moment it's like this. Whatever you're feeling, at this moment listening to me talking like this, you're aware. Whether I'm confusing you, I'm inspiring you, you agree with what I say, or you disagree, but it's not a matter of each person agreeing or appreciating what they're hearing, but whatever you're feeling emotionally and response to what you're hearing is the way it is. It's like this. So these words, it's like this, is a skillful use of language because it's non-judgmental. When we're saying this is a really good moment, I'm feeling inspired, my faith in BuddhaDhamma has increased, or I'm bored, I don't know what he's talking about. What you can know is what you're feeling at this moment is the way it is, without judging it as right or wrong. So you begin to trust in the ability to just witness, experience. And that's witnessing the changing conditions of phenomena of sankhara. Can a sankhara witness a sankhara? Is a good question to ask yourself. Can a sankhara be a witness? Can Sumedho as a person really be a witness to the world and to experience? And I can witness as a person, I'm aware of the crossing the street or climbing the mountain, but that's going outward to the objects of sight, the objects of senses. But Bhutto, the Buddha witness, is here and now, and it's not Ajahn Sumedho, it's the ability of human individuals to be aware, completely aware of the natural purity that we began to realize through sati sampajanya or mindfulness. So this is a new discovery for the Western world. Here in Singapore, many of you are brought up as Buddhists. And so you have a cultural conditioning that's influenced by Buddhism. But the cultural conditioning is still something acquired. So we oftentimes find in countries like this or in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Buddhists who think they can't practice or not interested in mindfulness meditation because, they still see themselves, they identify themselves with the physical body, with the worldly conditions that they experience through their senses. Where the awakening, like Buddha means awake and aware, so it's not something remote or difficult. It's just learning to trust, being here and now with whatever is you're experiencing in the moment. So this kind of what we call vipassana meditation in the Theravada scriptures, the four foundations of mindfulness and these teachings are directional signs. They're not doctrines about what to believe or what's right or wrong. They're pointers, always at the present moment. When we talk about body awareness, Gayana Pasana Satipatthana, the first foundation of mindfulness, it's not about being mindful of me as a person, judging my body, making value judgments about my body, being aware of it as such a personal identity, but it's being aware of the experience of having a human body. It's like this. Like the experience of being a human being, having a male body or a female body. is, being aware of it is like this. It's not saying it's right or wrong, good or bad, or one's better than the other. It's just pointing to awareness. The body at this moment is like this. And so you suddenly you're observing the body, witnessing the body, not seeing it in personal terms, but as it actually is the experience of here and now. So sitting is like this. I'm sitting in a chair. Here they provide seats for everybody. So we're all sitting on chairs is like this. In Thailand, for example, Wat Pah Pong didn't have any chairs. Everybody had to sit on the floor. And so sitting on the floor is like this. And then you think, I prefer sitting in a chair is what we believe, what we think. But whether you're sitting in a chair or on the floor is not really the issue. It's being aware of sitting as experience here and now is like this. So you're observing a natural condition because the four postures, sitting, standing, walking, lying down, are what we experience throughout the day and night through this form, the body that we believe is our real self. So we don't witness, and when we're not mindful of the body, we are aware of it as it's very uncomfortable, or it's comfortable, or I like sitting on the floor, or I prefer sitting on the floor, or I want to sit in a chair. These are judgments we have, we consider that can arise in sitting posture that we're experiencing here and now. The same applies to walking. When walking meditation is like this, walking from one point to another. Like in walking meditation, what we call jongro is just a method of defining the space we're going to walk through. So we say from this point to that point, we determine that's where our walking path is. And then the witness, the walking is like this. So you're aware of the movement of the body, the experience of your own body as it's walking is like this. Same with standing still or lying down. So these four basic postures are what we have to, what we experience life through this form with, through the entire span of our life. So we're learning to look at the body in a different way, rather than saying, I've got to practice walking meditation for an hour, or we make determinations, to see walking meditation as something we should do, or we don't want to do, or we want to develop it and cultivate it, and we're encouraged to do so. But so encouragement is well-meaning, but the actual mindfulness of walking is the whole point. It is the way it is, whatever you personally are experiencing when you're walking from that point to this point. Standing still, same applies, or lying down. Like lying down meditation, at first we just tend to fall asleep, because what we usually are conditioned to do is when we lie down on the bed to fall asleep, to go to sleep. So, are you mindful when you're asleep? You're not mindful of the body, but has consciousness disappeared? Does consciousness sleep? or just the body and its functions go into that state of sleep? Do you, does consciousness have a beginning or ending? It does on the sensual level. That consciousness of the senses is all about arising and ceasing. But pure conscious awareness, as you begin to understand it and realize it for yourself, doesn't sleep. Even when the body's asleep. And then when we dream, we're asleep, and so dreams are images that we create in our minds. Our one sense that tends to function while the body's asleep is to go into a dream state in which it imagines all kinds of things. So dreams are all about images that can be reasonable or unreasonable or terrible or pleasant. These images change accordingly. But consciousness is not a dream. The dreams arise in consciousness, and the dreams come and go accordingly. So these four basic postures are part of understanding the nature of the human form that we have to live with. Not seeing it in how well we sit or how well we walk or that, but it's not a matter of can a crippled person practice walking meditation. There's nothing to stop any of us for mindfulness meditation, whether you're invalid or healthy or sick. Because it's apparent here and now, it's timeless, it's what we really are ultimately, is this deathless reality, and not this very mortal, sensitive form that continually experiences suffering, unsatisfactoriness, getting old, getting sick, dying, loss of loved ones. We all have to experience the loss and death of people we love, our parents, our friends, and so forth. This is part of the human experience. The human bodies are they die. So they once they're born, they just grow up and get old and die, and that's natural. That's not when we see it personally. People ask me to live for 120 years. Every birthday in Thailand, they please live at least to 120. I'm 88 now, that's enough. And I can see just getting older and older, the more disabled I become. But is that suffering? Do I suffer from old age, from disabilities? And as awareness, no, there's no suffering there. Physical, there is still pain and frustration, when you can't see properly or hear properly and walk independently. You don't want any of that to happen. But that's the nature of the body. And that's not what I am. The body is the way it is. It's the karma of this condition. It's like this. And you accept it. It's allowed. It's okay. It's not judged as or resented or criticized. It's just the way that one has to experience till the body dies. And that's all that dies, is the human body. But consciousness doesn't die. So that's the refuge. When we take Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha as refuge, it's in the deathless Dhamma, Amata Dhamma, that we begin to abide in and rest and trust. And it's apparent here and now. It's not some mystical, far-off, remote possibility in the future, like it might seem to many of us. But it's through this investigation, turning inward, being the witness, the Buddha witness to the way it is. So I hope that this reflection will encourage you to investigate this religion that can be very traditional and ceremonial, but it's also its basis, its foundation is in wisdom. It's a wisdom teaching, and it's openly available to everyone. It's becoming a subject of great respect and interest in non-Buddhist countries, because it is a very wise teaching, just the basic teaching of the Four Noble Truths. The first sermon the Buddha gave after enlightenment is a very complete and perfect teaching if you practice accordingly. Suffering is the first noble truth, and it's to be understood. It's not to be gotten rid of or judged as something bad. To understand dukkha, you look inward, not blame conditions like mosquitoes or somebody else for your unhappiness or your doubts or worries. Worry, doubt, anger, jealousy, all these moods are changing conditions, and awareness, they arise and cease in awareness rather than awareness of them arises and ceases. So in allowing things to be what they are, like being fed up and wanting to leave, it's like this. Just by patiently accepting this feeling, by witnessing it rather than judging it or suppressing it, it ceased. I'm fed up with this. I actually witnessed the cessation of this particular strong emotion. And that was the insight into, I'm not the emotion, this is not self. This is what we call anatta, or non-self. So I offer this as a reflection for you all, hoping your faith and trust in Buddha Dhamma is increased. It's a reflective teaching, it's not dogmatic, but it's encouragement to every one of us.